The West Tigers podcast. The football action is back. Unfortunately, it's a post-loss edition of the West Tigers podcast, but I don't know. It doesn't feel too much like a loss to me. 20 points to 14, the final score in the game against the Bulldogs at Cogra yesterday afternoon. One-word submissions have been coming in from the West Tigers podcast forum. Thank you to everybody getting back in the habit of it for a whole new year. Tiger Tun's one-word submission was promising. Good one, Tiger Tun. Peter A. developing. Mac Tiger's one-word submission, maybe not quite so optimistic. It was par. So, in other words, par for the course, par for what we sort of expect from the West Tigers. Nothing more, nothing less. Lorenzo, potential. There was some potential on show. Lorenzo, I agree. Natmac 78, clunky, true. Barra, outgunned. Tigersman, outdefended. Only 4 tries to 3, but I get where you're coming from. Mike's one word was disappointing. No killer instinct again. Tiger Tragic 56, speed. Line speed and D and attack was lacking. Gary and Nick are with us for this edition of the podcast. And Gary, your one word please for that performance against the Dogs. Albeit, definitely not a first grade team.
Well, you just stole my one word, Joel. My one word was New South Wales Cup. For me, it was a New South Wales Cup squad, except for a couple of players, and I think it was a New South Wales Cup level game in the end from both teams. Both teams had some players who stood out, but there was a lot of players who played on both sides of the ball yesterday who probably aren't up to NRL standard, and I think that came across in the game yesterday.
Are you going to be naming names on this podcast?
Oh, we'll definitely be naming some names, Joel. Have I ever not named names?
Is that a question?
Yeah, exactly. We'll get to that point. Nick is definitely up to the mark when it comes to being on the pod. Is that right, Nick?
No, I'm well up to the
first
mark.
grade standard. Well,
100%.
Okay,
I'm a starter these days.
Look, you are first grade standard, Nick. It's a shame that the rest of us are at state of origin level, though.
Turn it up.
Nick, you weren't out there. Gary and I were out there, watched the game live. You watched the game on Fox, I think. Did you have a one-word submission for us?
Yeah, I did. It's maybe a slightly different take on the one word. It's 4 words, if I can use 4 words. And my 4 words are, it's only a trial. And I just had to keep reminding myself... You know, I did watch that game at home yesterday on TV, and I could just feel when they ran out, I was jumping up and down, or was getting very excited anyway, and saying to the family, "I can't believe we're watching the Tigers again. Here we go!" And it didn't take long for my anxiety levels to start picking up again, and before you knew it, we were kind of into the same rut, watching the team fumble our way through the first half and making a few errors, and looking like the team that I was hoping not to see, but. It's only trial, and we'll see what we can do next week.
Only a trial. My 2 words, you're never going to guess what one of them is.
Physicality.
Physicality is definitely a starter again. And damage. No, the result and the performance hasn't damaged my psyche or my mental health or something like that. But there was a couple of examples out there, Gary, and it's something so freakishly different and so... something that we're not used to. It was a really strange thing to see. A couple of West Tigers players, but one particular player actually went out there and did a little bit of damage to the opposition. And that is something that we haven't seen for ages. You know, I'm not picking on them, but you know, your John Batemans and your David Nofalumas, and maybe you might throw in someone, unfortunately, in his later years, a David Clemmer. They don't go out and do much damage, but Skelton on that wing, he was knocking people left, right and centre and actually doing some damage, and I loved that. I thought that was great.
Yeah, for me, both the way Kit and Skelton played yesterday, it was something we haven't had for a long time. We spoke last week on the pod about how our forward pack has lacked versatility over the last couple of years. And the way Kit played on the weekend, his impact through the middle, the speed and aggression he was running the ball with, made a massive difference. But I also have to put Skelton into that category as well, because his runs coming out of our own end was one of the things I highlighted last week I really wanted to see. And for me, he put his name into that round one starting side in pen. Like, he's not just penciled in. I'd be really disappointed if we go into round one and Jarrell Skelton's not in that team.
From the first hit up of the game, wasn't it? He took the kick off and just went himself, and I think he ran about 20 metres and dragged a couple of defenders at least, 5 to 10 metres on his own. He was very impressive, and he did it across the whole time he was on the field too. I can't remember. I don't think he was on the whole 80 minutes.
No, yeah.
He really stood out. He was good yesterday, really good.
You'd say on that performance, I mean, you presume the team, this pod will go live on Tuesday morning. The team for the Eels Clash trial game at Leichhardt will be announced this afternoon, if you're looking at it from a Tuesday morning perspective, if you're listening to this. I'd expect him to be one of the starting wingers based on that performance, Gary. I know there's a couple of other people that are looking for those wing positions, but I think you'd be mad not to pick him, given he's providing something that the team hasn't had for a few years, and that's that dynamic start to a set.
Yeah, his signing last year is one of the signings that really impressed me about Shane Richardson coming to our club, because he actually identified and said that we've targeted an area that we're poor in, and that's getting us that starter coming out of our own end. So we've gone and found someone who has that skill. Now, there's other deficiencies in Skelton's game. Like, at times in defence, he can really get caught out in defence and get stuck in no man's land and have some poor reads. But you cannot argue he doesn't fix that area of coming out of our own end. That's going to be massive for us this year. And the disappointing thing for me, especially that time he was on, he was getting a really good start to the set, but we weren't following that up really well yesterday. And that's probably the key down point for me out of the game, was our lack of go for it, especially in that first kind of half of football where I wouldn't say we had the big names on, but we had the guys we named the starters, and we didn't get that go forward we really needed. So that's what I'm looking for on Friday night. Our forwards being able to play off the back of a guy like Jarrell Skelton.
Look, you're starting to take us down the aisle of being a little bit negative. Don't take that the wrong way, Gary. There's plenty. There's a few negatives that I'd like us to discuss on this edition of the pod, and I'll get to those soon. But let's just we'll start off in positive land, and I've got to agree with Phil Gould, who said after the match, obviously he's connected to the Bulldogs, and we know all that, but he did make an important point. He thought that the West Tigers looked fitter, Nick. And that was something that struck me when I was watching the game live, is that fatigue has been an issue for us, and we didn't seem to get it. I know that you're playing players, most of the guys didn't play 80 minutes, and I know that's a little bit different, but I liked what I saw. We looked fitter, which I think is a great sign.
We did look fitter across the park. I think we had 4 less reserves named, definitely anyway, than the Dogs, and I assume that everyone went through their entire roster that 80 minutes. We didn't look big. Kit did look strong in the forwards, but when you're just talking about the starting forwards, and I guess when I look at the reserve bench too from yesterday, the Johannssen boys, they're a very different style of prop. We've seen Tim before, tall, lean, fast, but his brother, is very similar, isn't he, Noah, in the way that he's built. He's just, I know he's young, but didn't have a lot of impact. But from a fitness perspective, yes, they did look fit. And they played, they all played minutes that they were going to be restricted on their minutes based on the rotation. But I can't argue that they're not a fit-looking bunch. I agree with that part.
It was quite interesting yesterday. Watching the game, I sat next to Joel and Steve and watched the game. And watching the game, I wasn't very impressed with Tim Johansson's play in the game. But I looked at the stats after the game, and he racked up something like 160 metres.
That's right.
So it can't have been quite as bad as I was kind of expecting at the game. I did think he lacked a little bit of impact and ability to push through the line. I wouldn't say that his brother Noah didn't have any impact. There was actually things I liked about the game he played. I thought he had a really good leg drive once he hit the line. I thought he powered through the line quite well. The big thing with Noah, I thought, was silly mistakes that he had in his game.
Yeah.
And I thought that brought his game back quite a bit. But I actually thought he was the more impressive runner of the ball out of the two of them. I thought his leg drive through contact was a lot better than Tim's, watching the game live. But I do have to say, like Tim's stats coming out of the game were quite impressive. I just didn't think he had that impact early on.
It's a good little time to make this point, Gary, that I was going to say that we were sitting behind the Bulldogs bench, and I've seen a lot of football over the years. They have some absolute monsters. Like, they are really big. Those guys that they had that were on that bench, I was just shocked at the size of them. Like, and some of the guys that were starters and that, like, where we are, and I guess that comes back a little bit to that physicality thing, where I think we did pretty well at staying effective in defence. But what the Bulldogs threw at us was pretty impressive, and that has to be taken into account if we're talking about positives. I thought we did well to handle them given the size difference between the two. And that leads into the talk about Tim Johannssen, because we were talking at the game about how he just does not look like a prop. He just doesn't have the build when you compare it to the other people that are playing in that position. Maybe an advantage if you're talking about maybe a bench prop or something like that. But I don't know how that's going to work for Tim. I just don't know if he's got the build for an 8 or a 10.
Yeah, for me, I think he needs more time. And that's what I'm knocking him. The guy this time last year was only just coming back from giving the game away completely and was playing Ron Massey Cup. Now, last year he went Ron Massey Cup, New South Wales Cup, and then on to playing the NRL. That's a huge year. I just think he probably needs that little bit more time, probably to develop his body a little bit, because the training that level that he would have had over this off-season is completely different to what he had over the off-season previous. So, and that's what I meant last week by not wanting to put too much expectation on him because of where he's coming from. He's coming from a really low level 12 months ago, and that's a lot of growth in a short space of time. So I think we just need to be a little bit patient with him and give him that little bit more time. But as I said, I was really impressed with the stats of his that came out of the game. I just didn't think he powered through the line quite enough, and that may be due to that lack of upper body sort of size.
Yeah, he doesn't. As I said, he doesn't strike you as being a prop. Like, if you look at him, you could compare him to Alex Lobb, for example. Like, I don't think there's a massive difference in physical shape to Alex Lobb.
I must say, I'd probably prefer to have Tim Johannssen on the wing than Alex Lobb as well.
He's probably faster. Anyway, we're staying in positive land. We're talking about some positives. You mentioned him earlier on, Luke Laulilii. Nick, I thought he was really impressive. He was probably the highlight of the day for me. That come across on
damaging.
TV.
Yeah, really, really damaging. Some really, really strong runs. Carried a lot of people with him. Yeah, I mean, he played exactly like we know he can play. We've seen him, a few times before at NRL level. But I'd really like to see him have a big year. I'd like to see him get some regular NRL games, but he definitely showed what he can do. So it'd be interesting to see what the lineup is for this coming Friday night's game, whether we reuse some of the guys that had a crack yesterday or on Sunday afternoon, or whether Benji predominantly looks at the guys that didn't play. But it'd be interesting to see how Kit's used in that rotation if he is on Friday.
Yeah, I really want to see him get some decent time on Friday in multiple positions. I thought he did really well as part of the prep rotation, and I want to see him whether he can maintain that aggression and that running style against a higher quality opponent that he's going to get in the trial on Friday. But I'd also like to see him get a little bit of time in the lock role. I think that is a role that he could actually help out in during the season. And for me, I spoke about guys who I thought had an opportunity to push themselves into contention for the starting lineup for round one. And I think Kit put a really good foot forward to at least be considered going into the round one for a bench spot. I thought he was fantastic yesterday and provided something that we haven't had in quite a bit of time. That his go forward and his ability to damage the defensive line was really impressive yesterday.
If you take a step forward and go beyond the Eels game and you go to the round one game where Talon De Silva's going to be the hooker, touch wood, you'd think that Latu Fainu will get the interchange, the first interchange position there. But I think there's at least one spot available on that bench. Like, I think you're probably looking at a Hunt, and probably based on reputation, Twal, Pole would be in the mix. But I think there's one more spot there. Like, I think there's the opportunity for somebody to grab that spot when I look at the lineup for round one.
Yeah, I'd much prefer to have someone like Kit on the bench over 12. I think he provides a lot more impact than what we've seen from 12. 12 is quite strong defensively in the middle, but you don't get a lot more out of him. You get decent meters, but you don't get much impact. I would personally prefer to have someone, if Kit can back it up this week against a higher quality opposition, I would have him in that pack, on that bench, over 12.
Are we still thinking that that Latu is going to be the 14? I'd like to actually see him play some more minutes this coming Friday night, to be honest, because I wasn't overly impressed with what I saw with Latu yesterday, and I don't know whether... It's funny because I rewatched some of the highlights this afternoon as well, and watching Latu, especially in the first half, and I know that was predominantly when Galvin was on the field, or the only time Galvin was on the field, but he just seemed to pass the ball to Lockie non-stop. Like, fifth play was just give it to Galvin. Lockie did most of the kicking, the deep kicks, the kicks to the corner, was all Lockie. I really wanted to see what Latu could do, and I did hear, I think it was Cooper Cronk, made a point during the commentary on the Fox too, that he said at one point midway through the first half, I really want to see Latu stand up because everything's going out to Galvin. So I don't know if Latu would be a walk-up 14 for me for round one. I know he's got some versatility there and he can cover a few positions, but I want to see him again on Friday, hopefully, and I'd like to see him try and create a little bit more than what he did yesterday.
I think it was a little bit of a hard situation for Latu on the weekend. I do think Galvin really took control of that side, and probably, it's hard to say because I thought he was really strong and had a great game, and the try he put on with a fake kick and then step around to put Fatape down the sideline was really great play. So I thought he was really, really good, but I thought at times he probably overplayed his hand a little bit and probably overcalled Latu a little bit as well. So I don't really have an issue with that when he's playing in a trial with pretty much a bunch of kids, because it's not something that's going to happen once Jerome Luai is playing next to him. He's not going to be overplaying his hand in that situation. So, but yeah, I think he may have overplayed his hand a little bit on the weekend, and that may have made the job for Fainu a little bit harder. But Fainu did have opportunities, especially when we were down in their 20, where he didn't bite into the line when I think he should have done. And he didn't go to the line. He kind of shoveled the ball out to the players outside him. I would have liked to see him to attack the defence a little bit more than he did in those couple of opportunities we had inside the opposition 20.
So two quick things off that one, Gary. So do you think Lockie maybe firstly was just excited to be playing and wanted the ball so much that he wanted to call all those shots? And
he only had half a game as well.
He had half a game, yeah. So maybe he was busting his butt to try and do as much as he could in 40 minutes, which I get. But, it sort of takes a little bit of shine off Latu, what Latu can do, not what Latu could do or did do yesterday, but what he can do. And the other part, just while I'm thinking about it too, and you mentioned this coming weekend, assuming Lockie's going to play in the halves with Jerome Luai, is how differently Lockie plays then alongside Luai. And this will have a lot to do with how they've gelled and bonded and formed a combination over the pre-season or the off-season. But I'd be very curious to see if Lockie's game changes, if Luai does most. And Luai, to me, looks more of the talker and the barker, so he's going to be, I think, more vocal on the field. Lockie does yell and scream. You would have heard it yesterday, but I see it on the TV. But I'll be very curious to see what the dynamic is on the field against the Eels. This will be a very interesting trial, this second one.
It was quite interesting to watch Lockie play yesterday because we saw him last season predominantly play that left edge, but switch over to the right side at times. Yep. Yesterday was the opposite. So I think it's quite clear where Jerome's going to play and where Lockie's going to play. Lockie did spend most of his time out on that right edge, which is the opposite to last year, and then he would swing around to the left edge. So I think we'll see. I think Lockie's going to play both sides, and I think it's actually one of the strongest parts of his game is his ability to get into position so quick. That for me is what sets him apart from other young players. Is when he does sweep from one side to the other, and he did it a few times yesterday. He's in position and setting up that next play so quickly, and I think it comes down to his fitness levels. They talk about the time that he did in the Bronco test, and those things are very evident with the way he plays on the field and his ability to get around the field. But it's going to be a little bit different this year because he's going to be spending a lot of time on the right. So I was really pleased to see him put on that move and put Fatape away down the right, because it is a bit of a concern I've had over the off-season about how he will handle that switch of sides. I thought at times, especially in our red zone, I thought he struggled with it a little bit, but he at least was able to put on that try from 60 metres out with a good move on his opposite player. So I think there's going to be a little bit of time for that to sort of settle in, but Jerome's going to be the guy calling the shots. It won't be Lockie calling the shots. I don't think there's any doubt of that, and I think that will be an improvement on what we saw yesterday.
And I've just heard too, Gary, that apparently Lockie's time in the Bronco is only the second fastest in club history behind yourself. So congratulations on that record.
Yeah, you better tell Lockie that. Make sure he knows.
Lachlan Galvin is not Benji Marshall. They're not exactly the same. They're not cut from the same cloth. They don't play the same. But there is a similarity between the coach and Lachlan Galvin at this point in their career, and that is every time I get the ball, I've got to try and score points, and he's got to lose that a little bit. He's got to, and I think Luai will help him settle that down, because sometimes you're just setting up for the play that gets you to the opportunity to score points. There's just too much blood rushing through that head at the moment, I think, because he was all over the place, right and left, and way overplaying his hand, in my opinion.
But what 19-year-old isn't like that? So I don't think it's a major issue, and I don't think it's a major issue that he overplayed his hand, but I think that took away opportunities from Latu a little bit. And the positive is, Latu will get time in the halves this weekend. But it's probably not going to be playing with Lockie in the halves. I think at some point, probably in the second half, he'll have the halves, and he'll probably have a bit more control of the halves. Because I would think at some point he will not be playing with Lockie, and he won't be playing in the halves with Jerome. He'll have that to kind of run himself, and I think we'll probably see a little bit more from him in that situation.
Staying with the positives, Solomon Sakuru. We've heard the name, we've seen him on the website, we've know he's been around and with the club for a while, and
I thought he didn't exist, Joel. I thought it was like Eddie.
That's right.
I thought he was an Eddie Otto and just never showed up.
That's right, the Phantom. He was really good. Number 17 in the second half. He picked out he was on the left centre position, but he kept coming into the middle, Gary. He was really looking for work, and when he had the ball, he also did some damage. He was able to get through and push through the line just about every time. I was most impressed from a guy that sort of just all of a sudden blipped up on the radar.
Yeah, for me, his best work was when he came in and worked through the middle. He did some nice things at centre, but he also got caught out a couple of times in defence at centre. But I thought he was really strong when he came right into the middle, right in the middle of the field, and I wouldn't be opposed to giving him because he's got a pretty big build for a centre. I wouldn't be opposed to giving him a little bit of time at prop and just see how he handles that, because he was damaging going through that middle part of the field on yesterday.
Nick, just another one. Mark Tannis. I mean, he came on. He played the second half. Still very young, very raw. It's the second time I've seen him play. Again, I was quite impressed. I think there's something there. There's a potential talent there, and he seemed to me to be pretty calm. He didn't look like, if you compare that and contrast that with the guys that started in the match in the halves, he kind of looked like the guy that had the most experience, if you ask me.
He did. He does look young. He's very very slight. He looks like he's got to develop into his body a little bit. But I did like the way he played. He threw some a couple of second man passes. He knew how to draw a man. He did look like he was out there having a good time without a lot of pressure on him. So that was good to watch. I didn't see a great deal of him, but I'd be interested to see if he gets another run this week.
We spoke last week when the team was named about Sione Fainu playing on the edge. I thought he handled himself well. Gary, I said to you while we were watching the game, I thought he'd slimmed down. I thought his body shape changed a little bit. I don't think he's going to be in line to take Alex Seyfarth's right edge position in round one. I don't think, but
no chance.
I saw, I thought he handled himself pretty well. I was pretty impressed.
Yeah, I thought he was solid. I would have liked to have seen him spend a little bit more time on the edge. He didn't get a great amount of time on the edge, so I would like to see him have an opportunity to do a little bit more. But yeah, I don't think he did enough to force his way into contention at this point for round one. But I would say he'll get another opportunity on Friday night. He'll have some time on the field on Friday night, and we may even see him out on the edge again, and we'll see what he can do on Friday.
Did Sione come off injured? Because the commentary said he came off looking like he'd hurt his toe. I don't know what happened there.
Yeah, at the ground, I believe he came off at some point quite early, but I can't remember, but I was pretty sure he came back on and played some time in the middle throughout the game, but I may have that wrong watching it at the ground.
I've kind of pretty much run out of positives. Are we ready to make a turn to slightly negative town, guys? What do you think?
What there was negatives yesterday, Joel?
There was a few negatives. There was a few guys that, as far as I'm concerned, maybe had a line put through them.
Yeah, so some guys showed for me yesterday that they don't have what we kind of need.
That maybe they're going to plateau out at New South Wales Cup level. Look, let's go back to Kit Laulilii, who's not in that based on that performance. But there's been talk about Kit Laulilii, Justin Matamua and Brandon Tumeth. Tumeth didn't play. He was there yesterday. But when you compare and contrast the Laulilii to Matamua's game, I thought Laulilii, just if you want to go with those two, was streets ahead of him. I was quite disappointed in Matamua, Gary.
Yeah, I was starting to get my hopes up a little bit for Justin Matamua that would see that breakout sort of game that we've been hoping for 3 years now. And I look at his body shape. He's obviously worked really hard over the off-season and put in a lot of effort. Has trimmed out a lot. Looks incredibly fit. But I think we saw the same player pretty much on the field that we've seen in his past outings, and that was a disappointment for me because I was hoping he was going to jump out of the ground today and yesterday and make that 13 his own and show that he can own that spot. But I have a couple of concerns. I don't think he provides enough impact in that role. I don't think he's a big enough risk when running the ball to make his ball playing at 13 effective enough. And again, yesterday, there was some really poor passes. There was really only one really bad, but it was a really bad ball well behind the player. And for me, I think I've probably seen enough. I think he's probably had enough opportunities to put himself in the frame for first grade. Like it was 2 years ago now, where everyone was talking that he was going to be the starting 13 for the start of the 2023 season. Here we are in 2025, and I don't think we've seen the growth that we've needed from him.
Yeah, after the game, Gary, I sat down and looked through the team list, and there were a couple of names that stood out to me that I didn't recall playing, and Matamua was one of them. And I had to really focus on watching him when I watched a bit of the highlights and this afternoon. But he was very quiet and really disappointing because, like we said on the last pod too, he's apparently trained the house down. He did look really good, but didn't have a lot of impact on that game at all.
And I'm going to make a really unfair comparison here, and I'm going to compare him to who I think is the best ball-playing lock forward in the game in Asai Yo. The reason why his passing game is so good is because when he puts his head down and goes, he can easily push out 150 metres plus in a game. Now, Matamua, and it's not a fair comparison because I am talking about the best ball playing like in the game. But Matamu is not providing that threat as a ball runner. He goes to the line, he gets hit, and he gets buckled back. And to really be that successful ball player, you got to have the opposition fearing when you run the ball. You got to have them worried about you running the ball, so you hold them up from sliding off you. That's the whole role that Yo plays for Penrith, and Matamua can't do that at all because I don't think he scares the defence, which is a shame because potentially he does have the ball skills to fill that role, but I don't think we're going to see it, and especially I don't think we're going to see it at our club.
Yeah, I think he was still pretty long odds to be in the first grade team for round one anyway, the way that it goes. What do we think about the point that Tiger Tragic made about line speed? It didn't grab me in my conscious attention when we were out at the ground that our line speed was poor, but we spoke a little bit last week in the preview pod about defensive attitude and about, like, I think there was some positives in the defence, Nick. I thought that we scrambled well, and I think if you couple that in with that, what we talked about earlier, that fitness, like, I think line speed could have been better, albeit the Bulldogs were pretty big and pretty strong, but I don't know, I thought there was a few things about defence to like. I think 3 of their 4 tries were scored right out on the wings. But, you know, they didn't break us too much.
And one wing especially got targeted.
Yeah, one wing.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
I've
I think there was
comments about that too. Yeah, sorry, Joel. I was going to say that the comments I've made are that we got caught short a couple of times out wide. And that's been a bit of a trait over the last few seasons too, that we don't seem to either number up well or we get caught by the opposition attack very easily. The Dogs just seem to... At times the Dogs look pretty classy putting numbers on us out wide, and I was trying to watch some of the replays back, trying to figure out if it was our defensive error in the read or whether it was just good attacking play, but it just happens so frequently. I just wonder whether it's a defensive issue at the club.
For me, I thought the Bulldogs ran really nice shape yesterday. And what I'd like to see is us running better shape. I still don't think coming out of yesterday's game, I thought we were playing too flat and didn't run shape well enough to really cause headaches especially out wide to the Bulldogs' defence. They ran really nice shape at us anytime they got down within our 40. And for the most part, I thought we covered it fairly well and slid fairly well. But then on a couple of occasions, especially down Lob's wing, Lob made a couple of really poor reads, very Nofaluma-like reads, where he rushed up and in when his centre probably could have covered and made the tackle and got beat down his wing because of it. That, for me, is an issue, and I was talking about guys who I think probably seen enough of, and Lob probably falls into that as well. I don't think he's going to be seeing much first grade. He was definitely a liability in defence at times. The lack of speed that he showed also. There was that play, we got down their end towards the end of the game, and Lob got the ball on the outside. And I don't mind that he came back in, but the slowness of that turn back inside was really concerning as well. But there were definitely improvements in defence. I thought for the most part our first contact was pretty good, and we were getting the Bulldogs players onto their back a lot of the time. I thought there was a significant effort from our defenders to turn the Bulldogs players onto their back and try and slow down the ruck that way. So they were all positives. The first try they scored, they had a stretch for numbers, but they didn't even end up having to go wide because I think it was Matamua missed a really poor tackle in the middle and they went straight through the middle. They're little things that we've got to get better. Last year, we'd see at times we'll be in a game and then there'd be a poor read in defence or a really poor missed tackle and it would put us under pressure or put us behind on the scoreboard. And that kind of happened with that poor tackle by Matamua yesterday and a couple of poor reads by Lob, I think really hurt us at the end of the day.
If you're listening to this podcast, you're not going to be able to see what I'm doing, but I've got my Bic 4-colour pen. See, and I've put the red down. See, I'm ready to draw a red line through Alex Lob. I'm sorry, Alex. Like, no offense, we've got 2 Alexes, and that's probably, the quota's too full already.
Definitely can't have 3 Alexes in one side.
We don't have room for 3, sorry. Go, Nick.
Just one more thing on Alex Lobb before we put that line through him and never talk about him again. I was interested, I know he's a goal kicker, but I was interested to see that he was taking the shots at goal yesterday because he won't be in the round 1 team, but we won't have Appy. And we were talking about Talon De Silva. I think Declan made a comment a little while ago in our group chat that Talon has goal kicked before, or potentially is a goal kicker. So I was curious as to why they wouldn't give someone else a crack at having those shots at goal, but I don't know, maybe Benji's got some other idea on that one.
I also don't think he kicked that well yesterday. It was quite windy. Like, the wind coming up from the south was quite strong. But the Bulldogs players kind of allowed for that wind quite well on a number of their kicks. But Lobb's couple of conversion attempts really went across the face. And he was kicking from the harder side, and the wind was blowing it away from the post. So they were definitely harder kicks, but I would have liked at least that second one to have been a little bit of a better attempt. But in saying that, I think I said a couple of weeks ago, Jerome Luai has kicked in the NRL in the past, and something like 7 from 11, not a lot, but he has kicked in the past, so that may be an option as well.
I'll give Alex Lobb a couple of points out of 10. He did manage to start the ball on the black dot for each kick. They just tended to get blown off track quite a long way, but yeah, good try, Alex.
Blame the wind. So we can join the dots there. We haven't spoken about Heath Mason. Now, we've heard about Jareem Bula potentially not being available for round 1 and maybe not playing in this trial. Gary's going to pull a face here, but does Adam Dewey come into calculations to play fullback and kick goals? I mean, stranger things have happened, Gary. Stranger things have happened.
Stranger things have happened, but I never want to see Adam Dewey play fullback ever again.
Well, not here anyway.
Yeah, look, for me, the lack of speed is a real issue in that role. He's at fullback. I want someone who's fully committed in defence, and I don't think you get that from Adam. So I think he's probably going to have a spot in the team come round 1. I think it'll be at centre.
100%, yeah.
That probably wouldn't be my choice, but if we're going to play him, I think his best position is centred, especially if he can work on his defence a little bit.
Which brings in the goal-kicking attributes, Nick. If Bula isn't available, based on Heath Mason's game, look, Mason played as Mason normally does, but would you be going with someone, given that it's such an important game, that round 1 game, would you be going with someone with more first-grade experience, like a Charlie Staines who's played a bit of fullback? Stafford Toa hasn't excelled there. As I mentioned, Dewey's a possibility, maybe Taruva.
Taruva wants to play fullback at some point.
Yeah. What do you think about that, Nick? Would that be something that you'd think about rather than giving Mason the go?
No, I'd give Heath Mason the number 1 jersey for round 1. I didn't mind what I saw yesterday. I thought he was quite busy. I don't remember him making any mistakes or too many errors anyway. I thought he was quite solid. Tried to bust the line. He made a couple of half breaks, but I don't think he got a clean break. But I like the way Heath Mason plays. He's only a small fella, but I'm not going to hold that against him. We all know how big Brett Hodgson was, and it wasn't very big at all. But yeah, I'd give Heath another crack. I don't mind him at fullback.
He showed really good speed on the try he scored. The kick back in field from Lobb was actually a really nice kick back in field. But Mason came from a fair way back and ran past Fatafe like he was standing still to gather the ball. So it mightn't have been Fatafe. I think it was someone else he ran past. But he ran past the inside support player really quickly. So there's some speed there. I do worry about him a little bit at times. I don't think he attacks the bombs how he should. I think he's prone to let one bounce. And there was one yesterday that we did let bounce. Couldn't get to it.
The centres stood there and looked, and Talon was there too, looking with his hands on his hips. He was waiting for Heath to come through, but there were a couple of guys that should have put their hand up to catch that.
Yeah, I don't think it was just him. I think there's a little bit of confusion about who was going to take that pass, that bomb. But for me, the fullback really has to be in position to get to that. So, and we saw it a couple of times last year when he was playing that fullback role. He let a couple of bombs bounce. So I think that's something he really needs to work on.
What about just speaking about fullback? You've also got the born again Brent Naden. If you watched him in the Indigenous versus the Maori game, to me, Gary, it looks like Brent Naden's got his head screwed on right, that he's ready to make a second go of his career, that everything's going to be roses and he's turned a corner and everything. And Gary's sitting there going, I don't trust this guy. I can't give him. I can maybe put him in the centres, but I definitely can't give him the fullback spot for round one.
Look, I'm not necessarily saying no to the fullback spot. I defended Brent Naden for a long time. He has all the natural ability, all the skill, the speed, the size to be one of the best centres in the game. He really does. And I wasn't at all surprised by the game he played on Saturday night. I think it fits with how he's played in the past. He had a blinder either last year or the year before in the Indigenous All-Star side as well. And I think at times he's played really well for us as well. I want him to do well because there is a good footballer there. I also would like to note, when he went back to reserve grade last year, he spent a fair bit of time in the halves. And I thought he played really well in those roles in the games that I saw play. And what I thought about that was the fact that he was playing in the halves meant there was less opportunity to kind of float in and out of game and let that poor concentration level that we seem to see from him at times impact on his game, because he was heavily involved. And maybe playing in that fullback role where he has to be more engaged in the game can actually be a benefit to keeping him engaged and stopping that silly stuff from sneaking into his game that is the biggest problem. I think he's a fantastic footballer. He's got all the skills in the world. But for me, before I get excited about him again and before I trust him again, I need to see 2 months of smart, disciplined football from him. Otherwise, I'm going to constantly be worrying about, well, next week, is he going to get himself sent off in the second minute of the game because someone's annoyed him and he goes and does something stupid? Like, we all know that's
it's
part
a
of his game.
Yeah,
and I need to see that head screwed on right for more than just playing in the Indigenous All-Stars game. I need to see it for a couple of months.
Well, he gave you that at the back end of last season, Gary, playing for the Magpies. He was pretty good, and he was up there with one of the best players on the field for each of those games that he played. So I'm happy to give him a crack. I reckon we could fit him into our top 30 or starting 13 in the back line somewhere come round one.
The thing I find with him is the wider you push him on the field, the more prone he is to doing something stupid. So, because I think he's less engaged in the game in those positions. I think he's a much better centre, because he played a game on a wing a couple of years ago where he just ran into touch. Like, he just ran over the sideline and caught the ball over the sideline. Because I think he needs to be constantly involved in the game, or his attention starts to wander a little bit. And it sounds like a horrible thing to say about someone, but I think the more involved he is in the game, the better he plays. So maybe that fullback spot could work out really well for him because it keeps him engaged.
Would you pick him over Heath for round one?
I would probably pick him over Adam Dewey to play in my centres. Because I do think he's potentially one of the best centres in the game. And I'm not saying I wouldn't pick him for round one. I'm just saying I'd be very nervous about what you're going to get from him. I really like Brent Naden. I think he's a good footballer. I think he's a lovely guy. I've spoken to him a few times, and I want to see him do really well, but he's got to sort out that silliness.
But would you consider him for fullback?
I would consider him for fullback, yeah. Especially as I think it would keep him more engaged in the game, and from what we saw when he played, he actually played halfback at times for the Magpies last year. And what I saw in those games, the effort he put into those games. There was a game I watched him playing at Combank. I don't know which game it was. He was playing reserve grade, and he ended up in the halves. He played all over the shop in the game, but he ended up playing halfback. At one point, he's put up a bomb, just about tripped over someone, got back up, chased the ball, and still nearly caught it on the full, because that's the type of play you get when he's fully engaged. Like, you get that chase down he did on the weekend. You get a guy who is full of effort, but I think his mind just wanders.
At this point of the off season, like I can't remember a year where there's been so many question marks over our backline, so many potentials, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what the team is for the trial against the Eels. But round one, there's some question marks. There are some rumours around Justin Olam that his knees are still causing concern, so I don't know where that's going to land, if he's going to be named, if he's going to play, what's going to happen there.
There's been some bad rumours about his knees, about potentially missing half a season or missing a full season. I really hope they're not true, because I think a fit and firing Olam playing at centre makes the world of difference to a guy like Jerome Luai. And
Luke Laulilii, there's some rumours about a concussion at training, and apparently he's had some concussion issues. I think, from memory, I remember a game last year where he had head injury, HIA issues, but there's that rumour, neither confirmed by the club, so we're flying a little bit blind as to their availability. Just on that that game on Saturday night, Royce Hunt also apparently injured. He only played about 5 minutes. He to start with, he came off with I think it was an arm injury or something like that. He didn't seem to have any shoulder, was it?
Shoulder burner it was in the end.
Yeah. So it looks like he won't be playing in the trial. He was there at Cogra. Gary, the breadth of that man, he is. I've never seen him in person before, but his shoulders are epic.
Yeah, I think I could lay down across his back and he'd fit me all in. He is a big boy. And I was actually quite impressed with him in that All-Stars game. He actually played decent minutes. Like, he was on the field for a long time on Saturday night in that game. I thought his impact he wasn't quite as impactful on Saturday night as what we saw him at the Sharks last year, but he definitely played some decent minutes on Saturday night. So it'll be interesting. I was really hoping to see him play this week, so I hope the injury reports are wrong, because I'd love to see him play on Friday night, because I want to see how we're going to use him. That's one of the things I'm really interested about going into this season.
If we overthink it, because we did speak a touch about this last week about Clemmer being picked for that trial against the Bulldogs. He's now going to be playing in the game against Parramatta because Hunt is going to not be there. So I think Clem's fallen down the pecking order. You can't not put two and two together and say that seems to be what's going on. Anybody believe in my conspiracy theory? But I think he's fallen down to 4 or 5.
What was the reason for Clemmer not playing yesterday?
Because Royce Hunt got injured in the Indigenous game.
That's the rumour.
Okay.
So there's no official reason given for why he didn't end up playing last night, but there's rumours going around today that that Hunt did pick up an injury in that game and won't be playing on Friday night. So they pulled Clemmer so he'd be able to play on Friday.
Right.
It'll be interesting. I think he could have. I think he could have made a little bit of a difference yesterday in that pack and given us a little bit of better go forward.
Yeah.
I thought we missed him yesterday because, for me, the biggest issue we had yesterday, and the slight negative, was in that first half, our inability to get the ball down the field and get out of our 40. The amount of times, and it wasn't always on the last, but the amount of times we were kicking from inside our 40 was a little bit concerning. So, what I'm really looking forward to on Friday night, and I was looking forward to it more before the rumours of Hunt not playing, is whether we can improve that go forward on Friday. Because I think that's going to be key to our season. We can't rely on Lockie and Jerome setting up tries from 60 metres out like Lockie did yesterday. We need to be consistently getting down the field a lot better than we did yesterday, and I'm really excited to see how May goes on Friday, and hopefully Hunt's in the game as well, and we can see if that go forward improves from what we saw yesterday, because that was the hardest part, I thought, for our halves yesterday, was playing behind a pack that didn't really have the go forward. And the hardest thing for Latu, how do you, especially as a young 19-year-old guy, how do you have a really strong impact on the game when you're getting no go forward from the forwards? That was my issue in that first half yesterday.
I'm assuming Fainu Bula is going to be playing on Friday night, so there's some more impact.
It'll be interesting to see how we play him, whether he's going to spend time in that lock role or whether he's just going to be used primarily in the prop rotation. So that's something I'm very interested to see on Friday night as well.
Yeah, maybe some more answers to questions when the team is named later today on Tuesday afternoon, 4 o'clock Tuesday afternoon. Friday night's not too far away. We've all been looking forward to Jerome Luai running out for the West Tigers. It's a big game for the club. But somebody that we're also been really highly anticipating is the return of Eddie Otto. And Gary, he's apparently promised he's going to be doing the midweek pod after that team is named. And he's going to be joined by the other phantom, which is Declan McCutcheon.
Declan's still around. He's still on the pod?
I think so, yeah. I think we renewed his contract for another year. And Steve as well. So it's going to be 3 different people for the midweek pod, which would be good.
I did find it funny today. We haven't heard from Eddie pretty much all off-season. I think he popped in and did one of the West Tigers Unites and maybe one other pod in the whole off-season. And today he just shows up and starts bossing people around.
Yeah.
Setting out the whole week's agenda for everyone. It was like, yeah. It was like a boss who's been on leave for 6 months coming back and trying to stamp their authority when other people have run the show for them for the past 6 months.
He is the star of the show.
Well, in his mind, anyway.
In his mind, yep. Exactly. All right, guys, anything to add from that trial game? As I said, glad to see the football's back. A few positives, a few questions, a few concerns. I'd just probably say one thing. I thought maybe if you looked at the two teams, just thinking about it, the Bulldogs looked maybe a little bit better coached, a little bit further along in their development to us. That's something that maybe stood out a little bit.
Yeah, I thought they showed, as I said earlier, a better shape and better structure in attack than what we put forward yesterday. Hopefully that improves on Friday night. It's really look. Yesterday was a trial of pretty much New South Wales Cup players. I think we'll name a fairly strong side, close to a starting round 1 side for Friday night. So I'm really excited, really keen to see what happens on Friday night, and I can't wait to get out to Leichhardt. I may head out there after we get off this pod and just line up. I think you were lining up outside Cogra for a couple of hours yesterday, Joel. I might line up all week outside Leichhardt Oval.
I was stuck in a line that was sort of not going anywhere.
And I hear some people cut that line, I heard, Joel.
There were people cutting the line, rude people that came up from the other direction and just butted in like they were VIPs.
I wonder who that was. I think it was Steve.
Exactly. First time I'd been to Cogra in 40 years. Like that, I'd not been to Cogra Oval in 40 years, and I don't care if I don't go for another 40 years. It's not much of a venue. I thought it was a weird kind of place, and you're a mile away from the football on the western side.
It is called Cogra Oval, Joel.
I know, Cogra. But Leichhardt Oval is called Leichhardt Oval, and it's not an oval shape. It's a nice rectangle.
Not anymore.
That's right.
Used to be, a long time ago. Just before we leave the trial conversation, what do you think of Felity and Fatape? Because I know you've said that yesterday's squad was very much a New South Wales Cup lineup, but I thought those two guys played quite good footy. Fatape, I thought, stood out quite a bit. He looked quite evasive.
He looks like a guy
that's
played a bit of first grade. Yeah.
100%. And I don't think Felity made too many mistakes either. I thought he ran the ball quite strongly as well.
I thought Fatape was quite strong in attack. He had a couple of poor reads and poor misses in defence.
Yeah.
But it's kind of what you get from him, and I still don't think you can get a full season of consistent football from him. You've got to remember, he's a guy who not that long ago was playing Queensland Cup. So I think he's doing quite well, and he was quite impressive yesterday. I'm not at all convinced about Felity. He's at the make and break point of his career, I think, and I think we need to see improvement pretty quickly. I thought he was okay yesterday, but I think he's at the point where he needs to be a little bit better than okay. I don't expect him to see much, hopefully any first grade this year, unless his game improves significantly.
It's probably just, going down a rabbit hole, but I stayed and watched about the first 20 minutes of the Dragons and the Roosters trial, and albeit, not first grade squads, but they still had some pretty handy players out there. Gutherson.
The Dragons named a pretty hot team, mate. That was
exactly.
Yeah. And that was a pretty hot team.
The one thing that strikes me, and it's something that I've thought about probably, especially in the last 12 months, is it seems to be a greater jump between New South Wales Cup level and NRL level. There seems to be such a huge gap that you can kind of spot a New South Wales Cup level player, and then a first grader is just a whole 5 yards ahead of them. I don't know if that resonates with you guys.
100%. And I think over the past 10 years, we've had a lot of players who are too good for New South Wales Cup, but not good enough for NRL. And there's a couple of guys who I think are kind of falling into that range now, and I think we'll see. Hopefully, we have less of those level players who can kind of shine at that level, but can't make the step up. We need guys to make the step up from those junior ranks and from New South Wales Cup and be able to make a difference in our NRL side. Guys who we can put in there and we're not carrying them. You have a look at the really good sides. You have a look at the Panthers. They have the same systems throughout. And those guys from the lower grades, when they come in, they come in and they do their job and they don't let the team down. I don't think we've had that for a long time.
No, I think that if you look at our squad over the last 4 seasons, we started out probably with 15 of those guys 4 years ago, and we've weeded it down. We're probably about seven or 8 now. I don't think are going to be able to really contribute, or we certainly don't want them to be in the first grade team for this year.
And you have a look through our top 30, I think there's still too many of those guys that sitting here right now, we know can't contribute this year. A guy like, and I always single players out, but I don't like doing it. But a guy like Brandon Tumeth, you look at our squad and I can't see at any point in this season where he effectively contributes to that NRL squad. And that's been our problem. We are getting less of them. But I still think we've got too many people in our top 30 spot who are unable to contribute to the NRL squad.
And that's not necessarily a West Tigers thing, and it's not necessarily a Brandon Tumeth thing, because there's probably 5 or 6 guys that you could name there that wouldn't get a run in any NRL sides. It's not about us. It's just about where they're at.
And every squad's going to have those players from 25 to 30 who you're probably not wanting to use throughout your season. The last few years, when you get in the wooden spoon, you're using those guys.
We've been using them, yeah.
And when you get injuries, you're using those guys. But when you're playing poorly, you also have to use those guys. And our issue has been that we haven't had players 25 to 30 in that situation. We've had guys 22 to 30 in that situation, or 21 to 30. And it means that as soon as something goes wrong, there's a couple of injuries or there's players not performing, you don't have anyone to bring in as support. And that was a little bit of a concern I got from us yesterday, is there was a number of guys who do have top 30 spots who looked a little bit off the pace yesterday.
Yeah,
even in a level that was probably a New South Wales Cup game.
Alrighty. Let's leave it there. Looking forward to the midweek pod with Eddie and the guys. And then...
Are you going to have a listen to it, Joel? Do you think it'll be worth actually tuning in for? Or
100%. Because I guarantee there'll be little shots at us. I'm sure that'll be the case. Sometimes not all that subtle either from Eddie. But
Eddie will be having a crack at me no matter what.
Exactly. We'll see what we get. Win, lose or draw, we'll be back with the next edition of the podcast, which will probably be a bit of a mixed bag team. I don't know who's going to be there, but make sure you get your one-word answers in for that trial against the Eels, and we'll run through all of those and get serious from here. It's exciting, guys. It's exciting. Thank you very much, and we'll catch you soon.
Thanks, fellas.
Thanks, boys.